Mary Kate Beck is such a fun guest, and I'm happy to have a recruiter talking about sales positions. Sales in an organization can be a great career because you generally get paid well, you generate results, and the skills you acquire can be transferred to many other careers. Mary Kate Beck is a senior sales recruiter for the Fortune 500 CRM company Salesforce, and we talk about it all. With over 7 years of recruiting experience in an agency as well as in an organization, Mary Kate shares her professional journey along with providing clarity around location-based positions, sourcing versus recruiting, being aware of emerging markets for an organization, which is a great way to find new positions, nailing the recruiter screening interview, and so much more. It's important to note that positions like sales are generally always open at larger organizations because new territories are being created or expanded, and sales can have a high turnover also. Don't be discouraged if you apply to positions and don't hear back right away. Keep checking back and applying. Let me tell you, you are going to love this interview because Mary Kate gets into all of the details of the hiring process and offers so many wonderful tips. If you want to connect with me or need inspirational and educational career management and advancement content, you can follow Ride the Tide Collective on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. But I've been hanging out in LinkedIn quite a bit these days. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you didn't know, I also have the video version of this interview up on my YouTube channel, which you can also subscribe to. Just search Ride the Tide Collective. As always, I appreciate your support. Welcome, everyone. We're back with another recruiting episode, and I'm so excited for my guest today because we are talking about sales recruiting. And I know being in sales is a really hot job for a lot of people. And so I am so happy to have Mary Kate Beck with us from, I think, probably one of the biggest organizations in the world, Salesforce. I know a lot of people utilize Salesforce. They know who Salesforce is. And so I am so happy to have you here sharing your tips and your wisdom about your company, but also just as a recruiter, your own experience and what you've learned across the way to help candidates be successful. So thank you so much, Mary Kate, for being here with us.
Yeah, of course, Julia. It's a pleasure. I'm glad that you reached out, and Salesforce is a force to be reckoned with. So, massive company, but still like a small family feel. So, you're
Yes.
not just a number, which is good.
Yes. Oh, I love hearing that because I know that that is a really big deal right now in the hiring process. People want to know that they're going to be valued at the company. So I'm glad that even a company as big as Salesforce is really thinking about that when it comes to their candidates and their employees.
Yeah.
All right, let's just get right into it. So, can you tell us a little bit about your role and kind of what you're recruiting for and some of your experience as well? I think would be great for people to know.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll kick it off kind of with previous experience and how I landed at Salesforce, and then talk a little bit more about the day to day. So I started off in agency recruiting, which I think is a very common path for people to move from agency to corporate recruiting. So I started at a female run boutique recruiting firm in Chicago. It's called Bottom Line Recruiting, and there were about 4 or 5 of us, like recruiting day to day. So it was a huge shift moving from, agency life to corporate. But I was at the agency for about 3 years and I loved it, had great success, but it was one of those areas where you don't get to become an expert about the companies that you're recruiting for. You really only have a surface level understanding about the company's details, a lot of questions that I couldn't answer just because I don't work there every day. So after about 3 years of doing it, I was kind of getting the urge to recruit for a company that, I was working for, moved to the corporate side. And it was also important for me to recruit for a company that people would be really excited about, a lot of passion behind the company. So
Yeah.
I was referred into Salesforce. It was kind of funny.
Nice.
My friend referred me in. She's like, "Hey, I see you posting on LinkedIn about recruiting for sales positions. We're always hiring for recruiters. If you want to add me as your referral, feel free." And at
Yes.
first I turned her down. I said
No.
no. I said no because I was genuinely happy, like with my firm. I loved the women that I was rolling up to. They taught me everything that I know.
Mhm.
But I did sleep on it for like a night or so and went back to my friend and said, when Salesforce comes knocking, like I'd be a fool not to at least have a conversation. So submitted an application, went through the interview process, and the rest is kind of history. So I started off in more of a sourcing position, which is like supporting recruiters, finding passive talent, messaging people on LinkedIn. But it really taught me to master the sales
Mhm.
profiles of what we typically look for before being promoted into, full cycle recruiting, owning that relationship with the hiring teams and the
Mhm.
candidates. So I've been in a full capacity recruiting role for about 2 years now with Salesforce. The roles that I recruit for, we do it more based on geographic territory
Mhm.
and the level of account
Okay.
executive. So I know you mentioned on my LinkedIn seeing Utah. So I recruit for Utah, Colorado, and Texas, all the friendly states. So everyone's very easy to talk to in my territories. So account executives, so full cycle sales reps, usually a minimum of about 3 to 4 years of closing experience. And then I recruit all the way up to like our higher level commercial roles. So people that usually have like 10 to 15 years of
Hmm.
experience.
Okay. Okay. Oh my gosh. I love that. Okay. I have to say really quick, having a referral into the company is so great. So Salesforce honors those referrals. Some companies don't, but you guys do that.
Yeah, I'd
That's
say
awesome.
about 50%. I could be wrong on the statistics, but roughly 50% of our hires do come from referrals. And
Wow.
then we do have an SLA around processing referral applications. So it's now 7 days they have to be processed. So when we see a referral come in, it's top of the stack. Recruiters are notified. And then you have 7 days to either accept and set up a phone conversation or decline that application if for some reason they're not a fit.
Okay, okay, that's so good to know. So for those listening, those referrals for some companies, that's really going to kick you ahead in the process. So if you can do it, do it.
Yeah,
It's
even
definitely
if it's
worth
just a
it.
friend of a friend. Like my referral, it was just a friend from high school. We hadn't been connected in, several years, but it was one of those things where it's a win-win for everybody. You get a
Yeah.
referral on your application, and then that person that referred you in gets like a tiny referral bonus. So
Yeah,
incentives for
nice.
everybody.
Yes. Oh, I love hearing that. Okay, I want to talk about the great resignation because I know that's been such a hot topic across the world of work and recruiting and all of that. And I would love to know kind of your perspective if Salesforce has been impacted by that at all. Have you seen it shift and change the way you guys are doing things?
Yeah, it is very interesting. So not we haven't been exponentially impacted by the great resignation. I know other industries, like the hospitality industry and other industries where there's just not as much stability. I think people are really reevaluating, is this something that I want to do long term? Is this economy proof? Is it pandemic proof? So
Yes.
people really had to reevaluate when the pandemic hit. So for sales, luckily, that was a really easy transition for people to move remotely. I like to think of it as the great relocation, honestly. It really depends on what's important to people. So on one end of the spectrum, it can be very competitive because we are remote. So if you're going to be doing remote sales and a startup knocks on your door and they can, throw you a big paycheck because they just got funding, odds are we might lose out from a compensation standpoint because some people just don't feel like working for a big organization, if they're going to be working from their couch anyways. So
Right.
depends on what's important to people. So with sales, I feel like it's a little hit and miss.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we do try to stay in territory for our sales reps. So I know that's been a conversation piece when
Mhm.
interviewing candidates. If I'm hiring for a Texas role, unfortunately, you can't be based in Charlotte, North Carolina. You got to be based in Texas. That's where your
Yeah.
customers are going to be. And,
Right.
hopefully when we are traveling to meet with customers, we meet people in territory. So that's been a point of conversation just from a location standpoint. But we haven't seen like a mass exodus, fortunately, which is
That's
great.
good. That's so good. And you bring up a couple things, but I want to touch on the territory aspect because I want to make sure that candidates understand that there are positions where it matters where you live, and you want to make
Sure.
sure that when you're researching, you understand. And I feel like sales is one of those areas where you generally do have some kind of territory. And so you want to make sure that the positions you're applying for, you're willing to work in the territory that they're hiring for, or you're willing to, in some cases, move if you need to. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really important for people to understand when it says that they're hiring for a certain area, you need to be in that
Yeah.
area.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big misconception, especially for our careers site. So I'll get people on the phone and they'll say, "Oh, I thought it said, Colorado remote. So I thought I could live, you know,
Mm,
anywhere in the US since it's remote." And unfortunately, that's just not the case. We want at the very least our candidates to be in the same time zone as our customers. You can't work in Italy and be a Colorado rep. That's just not going to work
right,
for
right.
our customers. So, yes, when applying to roles, if it has a designated location, more often than not, Texas remote, Colorado remote, you have to be located in that state for those
Mm.
positions.
Okay, okay. That is so good to know. I think that's going to be a tip that I definitely highlight for people because I think you're right. I think they see remote and it's like, oh, I can be anywhere. Or maybe I do live in Colorado, but I'm going to go to Europe for 3 months or something. And it's like,
Exactly. Yes. They see
no.
the remote rose colored glasses, and that is unfortunately not the case. I
Okay,
would love
so
to work from Europe, don't get me wrong, but
right, me too. Me too.
yeah.
But I think that's a really good distinction, that I don't even know people have been really thinking about on the remote side. So there are location-based remote positions, and then there are truly remote work wherever you want, as long as you
Yes.
can adapt to whatever. And I think people
And
need to
that'll usually
understand the
say,
difference.
US based remote. It'll clarify, but if it has a state or a city, you have to be mentally prepared to live in that location.
Okay. Okay. Good. Oh, that is so helpful. That I have not heard that yet from other recruiters. So I'm so happy that that came up.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so I would love to know, is there a hiring cycle that you guys go through in your organization on the sales side, or is it just you hire when positions open up?
So I'd say from a sales perspective, we are really consistently hiring throughout the year. I wish I had some downtimes throughout the year. That would give me a little less stress. But with sales positions, there's always going to be cyclical attrition where people just, around this time of year are looking at new year, new job, with end of quarters, stuff like that. There's always going to be attrition throughout the year.
Right.
And then we're constantly, growing, expanding, getting new hubs. So even the Denver market, that wasn't even nearly as large as it was, 4 to 5 years ago. And now it's
Right.
becoming one of our largest hubs. So as we grow, as we get our footprint in larger territories, we need sales reps to have feet on the ground, be in those areas. So at least since I've started, we've definitely had really consistent, hiring throughout the year. So I always tell
Mm,
candidates too, like, hey, if timing isn't perfect right now and you're ready in 6 months, I would be shocked if we didn't have a position for you. So
Right.
we're usually consistently hiring.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, I think people think, "Oh, okay, I'm looking right now, so if they don't have anything, I'm not gonna keep looking." It's like, no, new positions get posted every day. You know, you
Exactly.
gotta turn that alert on, make sure that you're being
Yes.
notified because you just never know. So, okay, that's awesome. Okay, I would love to know about your ATS system if you have one. Like how is that used? What does it look like within your organization?
Yes. So we use Workday as our applicant tracking system. I've dabbled with Bullhorn in the past. I like Workday. It has its quirks. I mean, I feel like no ATS system is perfect.
Right.
But we use it primarily for, you know, referrals coming in, we process those applications. I really heavily source in Workday for applicants
Mm,
that are applying. They're warmer leads. They're usually people that are a little bit more open to making a move quicker. So process a lot in that. And then also, you can see how many people statistically, for this territory, how many people had to interview, how many people fell
mm,
off after the hiring manager phone screen or our panel interview. So we use it a lot for data just to see, which teams are a little bit like to see more candidates or a little bit more selective. So that's really important. And then just, data around offers, placements, it does everything.
Nice. So, as a candidate, like, are there any tips you have for people applying through that system? Like, is somebody looking through all of those? Are they being sourced through like an algorithm or an AI? Like, what does that look like for candidates?
I mean, we're pretty hands-on. We don't have AI tools. We do have some filters that we can apply when sourcing candidates, so I can narrow it down by location or years of experience or stuff like that. So I'd probably say my biggest piece of advice is just that referral piece so that it
Mm.
is the top of the stack, grabbing someone's email, obviously asking them for their permission, but it just sets your resume in front of a human being a lot faster.
Yeah.
Um, but always, always, always put a source of how you found
Mm.
this job. So
Okay.
whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through Glassdoor, whether it's a referral and you don't have their email address, like even just checking the box of referral, like check any box so that we can filter that way. I think the
Yeah.
people that don't have a source of the job tend to get lost in the shuffle because
Mm.
the ones that come through LinkedIn, Glassdoor tend to be at the top of the funnel.
Okay. 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 So, oh, so good to know. It's these little things that, people don't know all the time.
Yes.
That so good to know. I'm so this honest this you're the first recruiter that's really pushed that. And so I'm really happy to hear these like extra little tidbits.
Well, it's
So
because it's for
helpful.
our search tools, our filters. So the more specific you can be, the more boxes you can check. It will only, bring more attention to your profile
Yeah.
when we're filtering.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about more of the application process. What about resumes? What are you looking for? What do you wish candidates would have on their resume?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a sales perspective, biggest thing that I like to see and I think really jumps out to a sales hiring manager are numbers. So anything you can quantify, what your quota attainment was for the past 3 fiscal years, or if you've
Mhm.
only been there for 1 year, what was your quota attainment each quarter that you've been in the role? Any awards, accolades? I always tell candidates, like, if you're running out of room, we don't need a skills section at the bottom. Like, everyone can use Microsoft Word. It's not impressive.
Right.
So, like, if you can eliminate that and then beef it up with more numbers and, anything sales related. I think
Yeah.
really stands out.
Yeah. Okay. I love hearing that. Honestly, working with salespeople is like my favorite. They are the easiest resumes to put together
Yes. No,
because
no
they
fluff.
all have numbers. They know their numbers. They are proud of them. They can recite them,
Yes.
And so I think for those maybe who are new or who are trying to break into sales, maybe from something else, I know we have a lot of people who are shifting careers and things like that. You know, those numbers are so helpful. And we're hearing that repeatedly, regardless of what the position is. But I know specifically with sales, if you're not demonstrating anything, then how do we know you're going to be successful? So
Yes. How
good.
do you hold yourself accountable? How do you measure your own success? How does your company measure that success? Also, even if you're not in a direct sales position currently, anything you can quantify. Are you a server who wants to get, a minimum of, 25% tip on every check? Like anything you can quantify just
Right.
shows, your numbers ability, your ability to hold yourself accountable. It just speaks volumes.
Yes, yes. And I love that example right there because even those positions that you think might not qualify you for something, it can. You just have to keep track of it. So even those server positions,
Serving
especially
is
if
a numbers game.
it's totally a numbers game. And like, kind of on average how many tables you can manage in a night. Like, your totals, that type of stuff. And so being
Yes.
able to put that on a resume, I think people in those positions really overlook how much they actually do and how much
Yes.
it can translate into other types of positions in their career.
Yes.
So I love that you brought that up, especially now. I know hospitality got hit really hard during the pandemic. A lot of people transitioned out of that. And so I think that reminder of you have skills that you picked up from that, you have quantifiable things that you picked up from your time in hospitality, bring it over into these new roles, it will apply. So
Yes.
good.
100%.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about interviewing. Like when you get somebody into the interview process, like what does that process look like and what are some of your tips for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a pretty straightforward interview process. For the most part, it's usually recruiter screen. If that goes well, we move candidates to a hiring manager, whether it's a 30-minute phone call or 30-minute virtual meeting. And then if that goes well, we move candidates to a virtual 60-minute panel interview.
Oh.
Panel sounds intimidating. It's really just two hiring managers and yourself. I always have people think it's like the American Idol judges. It's really just, it's a conversation. It's two hiring managers. You'll be just fine. And then if that goes well, we move candidates to a 60-minute presentation where that is when an area vice president is involved. So the hiring manager's next level manager, and
Okay.
then at least one hiring manager, maybe two in a perfect world, depending on their schedules.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's so good to know. So they do end up having to do some type of presentation throughout the process. That's good.
Yes. And
Okay.
we prep people before each step,
Oh,
whether
that's
it's
good.
live through prep email. I prep everyone at least twice before the presentation because it can be very daunting.
Yeah.
Um, so just know, like, don't freak out, especially in a sales position. You do presentations for your customers all the time. We're not going to, pull things out of thin air. This is things that you do on a regular basis. So I
Yeah.
try to talk people off the ledge for the presentation piece a
Yeah.
little bit.
Nice. You know what? I love like that hands-on process where you're helping the candidates through because I know like when I talk to clients, they want to know like, okay, I don't know, like, what if they don't give me the information? What if and I'm like, just give them a chance to communicate with you first. And
Yeah.
so I love hearing when recruiters are really like, no, I want to walk you through the process. Cause if you're doing that initial screen and you really like someone, like you want to help them get through the process, I'm assuming. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what does that initial conversation look like with you? Because I think sometimes when people hear like, oh, it's a recruiter interview, they automatically think it's not important and they might not
Yes.
prepare for it as much. I know I've had that perspective from clients before. Like, what can you talk a little bit more about that process and what you're looking for?
Yes. So I will say our conversations are a little less formal than a hiring manager screen, but you still want to give it that professional, buttoned up, white glove experience for the recruiter because we're going to give you the same, respect that you give us. So, and we're the gatekeepers. I hate to say it,
Right.
we determine whether or not you're moving forward, buddy. So, you want to bring that buttoned up, polished, professional executive presence to that conversation. Biggest piece of advice, prepare, make sure you're in a quiet place. Like when I'm on the phone with candidates and they're like eating lunch or walking their dogs, it's like you are
No.
not taking this seriously at all. Like,
No.
and it's just a turnoff. It's like, are you going to do this with our customers? So take it seriously, prepare, review your resume. You don't want to be stumbling through, your accomplishments, your roles, the timeline. You really want to have that narrowed down. I don't get too in the weeds with candidates. I'm not a sales expert. I'm a recruiting expert.
Right.
So um, I'll ask kind of the numbers around, how large are your deal sizes? What types of customers are you selling to? How long are sales cycles? Very basic things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if people can't answer those or, are being really vague, stuff like that, you basically have to treat it like a hiring manager phone screen.
Okay. 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 I hope everybody heard that because
Yeah.
don't sleep on those recruiter
Yes.
interviews. I love that. You're the gatekeeper. I think that's the perfect way to say that.
It's heavy lies the crown, let me tell you. Just
That's
kidding.
awesome.
But
No, that's
yeah,
great.
I have friends that are like, it's just a recruiter screen. I'm like, no, it's not. You really have to bring it because we also talk to so many people on a daily, weekly basis. You want to set yourself apart as
Right,
well.
right, right. Oh, so good. Okay, let's talk about cover letters because I feel like this has been one of the most controversial topics in my interviews thus far. But I would love to know, like, what are your thoughts on cover letters? Do we love them? Do we hate them? Do we read them? Do we not? Like, where are
I've
you
never read
at?
a cover letter.
Never. Okay, good. Great.
I've never had a hiring manager been like, can I see their cover letter? Like, it just, maybe it's different for other industries. Cover letters are fluff when it comes to sales. I mean, we don't need a one pager on your personality. That's, what we're going to see in the interview.
Yeah.
We want your numbers to shine through on that resume. So, in my opinion, I don't think a cover letter is make or break. If you want to include one, great. I will not be reading it, but appreciate the effort.
Okay, I think that's so good to know. We talk a lot about researching the company and understanding what they're looking for. And what we're hearing here is Salesforce doesn't really care about the cover letter, So unless you
It's
talk
different too.
to,
I shouldn't be like setting the standard, but at least for me, it's
no.
like it's not important to my teams. I haven't really been blown away by one, so
Yeah, and I feel like this is where understanding, like, honestly, each recruiter and even the hiring manager, if you can get through to them and knowing what they're looking for. It's been really like 50-50 in the interviews that I've done. I've had some people that are like, yes, I read them, or I only read them in this instance, or they're like, nope, don't care, won't
I
ever
could
look at
see,
them.
in a media and communications position where, you know, how you craft messaging and,
Mm-hmm.
messages to clients, that could be a make or break.
Right.
But yeah, I think for sales, like it really is more about those intangibles that drive, ability to exceed will definitely
Yeah.
outweigh your ability to craft an email.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I do want to actually go back to interview because I realized I asked you
Yeah.
about the process, but I want to actually know, like, what are some of your tips for
Oh,
people? Like, what are some things that you're seeing people just like mess up on and you like, please do this because it'll help you get through the process. What does that look like for you?
yeah. I'd say my biggest piece of advice would be to practice answering some just hypothetical questions on your own, timing yourself. I always tell my candidates if you feel like you're talking too much, you probably are. So have some responses ready to go for questions that you absolutely know are going to come up in the interview. Practice your response to tell me about yourself. Practice a response to, what's a major success story that you had in your previous position. Keep it short and sweet. You want to keep it engaging,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this virtual world. Our attention spans are not as long as they used to be as they were in person. So
Yeah.
keeping it engaging, definitely having a solid response for, we always say, why Salesforce. So I always see candidates miss the mark when they talk about why not their current company, not necessarily how Salesforce fits into their long term career goals. So you really want to have thoughtful answers around what you can bring to the table, what this company can provide for you long term,
Mm-hmm.
and really how you're going to invest, long term. We're not looking to hire someone for 12 months. We want this to be a career move for people. So that's really crucial. And then just at the end, please, please, please have 2 to 3 questions at the end. Please have at least one question about the role and one question about the interviewers.
Yeah.
Um, if you don't have any questions, red flag, major red flag. You're making a huge career move. You don't have any questions.
Right.
Zero.
Oh my gosh. Yes, such good advice. I'm so glad that you said that. I think you're probably the second person that said that as well. Like you want to have some questions and
Please have one
thoughtful.
question.
Yeah, like thoughtful questions,
Yeah.
something that's actually going to help you decide, is this a place you want to be?
Yes.
Like, yeah. So,
Yeah.
oh, so
Reaching
great.
out to people that are currently at the company, currently in the role, have a coffee chat with them. It doesn't have to be a super formal, networking conversation, but pick their brain. That'll help questions, cultivate in your brain. So really, really great bonus if you can talk to someone who's in the current role, just to get their perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, so good. And LinkedIn obviously is the place where you can find those people and try to
Yeah.
connect with them. Like it's right there. It's right there for you.
And I feel like most people are open to having that conversation and being a resource. They were probably in your shoes a year or two ago interviewing for
Yeah.
Salesforce themselves. So I think it's a great touch. And then, they tell their managers, like, hey, Julia reached out to me. She's really invested in this interview process. It just goes to show how excited you are about the opportunity and
Right.
how seriously you're taking it.
Right. Oh, so good. I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. What is something that you think job seekers should be doing but aren't doing?
Oh, I mean, I should be looking at every single application that comes in. I am not. From a job seeker perspective, that was your question?
Yeah. So, if you were giving advice to a job seeker, like, what do you think they need to be doing on their end that maybe you're not seeing as much of, but you wish you were?
I mean, honestly, that networking piece, humanizing the experience as much as possible.
Yes.
Because, like I said, it is really easy for applications to get lost in the shuffle. So, if there is a company that you are excited about, whether you've applied or not, connect with a few people from that company, set up conversations. They can put in good words for you.
Mm,
I'd probably say get focused on the companies that you're excited about. Um, it can be really discouraging when you apply to 30 companies and you're not really excited about any of them. That'll shine through in the interview process
Right.
as well. So, really narrow it down to the companies that you're excited about that you want to apply for. And then that way you can invest your time in researching, networking, and preparing for those interviews, which will just better
Mhm.
your chance of getting that opportunity.
Yes. Okay. I love this advice, and I hope that everybody heard that because when I see people talk about, I applied to hundreds of positions and all of that, I'm like, oh, that's not it. That is not the flex
Mhm.
that you think it is. That for me as a career coach, I'm like, red flag. You have
Yes.
no idea what you're looking for, you have no idea who you are. You are not honed in enough. So you're likely applying out of like desperation or something is going on to where you can't focus in. And people don't like hearing that, right? Like I get the other side of it where it's like, yeah, but there's nothing out there, blah blah blah. I'm like, not true.
Mhm.
Especially right now, there are a lot of positions open, but being targeted and tailored is so much better for you, just your own like mental health in the applying
What do
process.
you keep track of all those applications?
Oh my gosh. But it tells me as a career coach, and I'm sure you as a recruiter, that you're not tailoring the positions and you're probably not applying to the right positions, which is why then you're being rejected from so many, you know? So I'm always like, less is more.
Mhm.
Less is more when it comes to applying. Like, find those like top maybe 3 to 5 companies that you're really into and then a couple of different functional areas that you know you could go into and tailor for that and just keep going. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but the more that you're tailored, the easier it is to say, this is a really great role for me. And you'll go hard trying to figure out how to get in with that specific role.
Absolutely. And I always ask candidates, how are other conversations going? And hiring managers ask that too. Like, hey, who else are they interviewing with? And if you
Right.
tell a hiring manager you're interviewing with 10 other companies, like, red flag, red flag, red flag. Like,
Right. Right.
we want to know that we are a top contender. We don't want to be competing with 10 other offers, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, narrow it down. I don't know how
Yes.
people keep track of all of that.
I don't
So,
either. It's so hard.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Any other like last thoughts or tips that you have that you want to share with people?
Gosh, I mean, like, this is a great step, like, listening to podcasts, listening to, interviews with people in fields that you're really passionate about, reading books, audiobooks, really just, like, learning about that field, especially if you're in the thick of interviewing. It can be
Mm,
really overwhelming, typing in top 10 questions to ask in an interview, and then you get
right.
so many different responses. So, any way that you can, watch videos, read books, listen to podcasts to become more of an expert in your field, learn new things, make yourself more well-rounded as a professional, I think is a really, really great asset. And it shows, interviewers, hey, I'm not afraid to go that extra mile. I'm not afraid to teach myself new things,
Right.
especially if you're coming from a different industry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Mary Kate, thank you so much for all the information and the tips that you shared. This was so great. How can people connect with you if they want to know more about Salesforce and more about specifically sales recruiting within Salesforce?
Yes, absolutely. So send me a connection on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active. Send me a personal message. If there's any role that you're interested, I always tell candidates, send me the job description. If I'm not aligned to it directly, I'm happy to connect you with the recruiters that are tied to those roles. Um, I have a personal website. I was telling Julia before this, I am a stand-up comedian outside of
Yes.
work.
Yes.
You can find all of my upcoming shows. I am based in Chicago. My website is mkbcomedy.com and
Yes.
Instagram, all over the socials at mkb.comedy. Always happy to connect.
Yes, and I will link all of that into the blog post for this episode because I think it's so cool that you're a comedian. I think that's so fun. It's such a good like you can do both. You can have that
Yeah.
full time position that funds your life, and you can do some really cool things after work. And I think you're just a shining example of that. So definitely go check out her comedy. I think that's so just fun and unique. And thank you again. I so appreciate you taking the time to share.
Yes, this was such a delight. Thank you. Thank you. And looking forward to having you in my network. Just another
Yes.
connection.